Thank you. So my name is Celine Liu. I am one of your coordinators of educational services in San Leandro Unified. And tonight I will be speaking about an area of passion and deep experience for me, which is how you support a growth mindset for mathematics and beyond. I'm joined by our amazing interpreters, Lacey Lee and Joanna Garcia, as well as Sally Berry, who is helping me drive, track questions, make sure that I keep on track for the next hour. For those of you who would like to follow along, the slides are accessible via the tiny URL that you see on the screen. Tiny URL, SLUSD family 7. And so if you go to that site, you will be able to find these slides. Also, we will be posting these slides at the end of our session, as well as a recording of tonight's presentation so that you can view it again later on. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Sally, if you would go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So as a reminder, if you or your student needs support with classwork or homework issues, Sally, go ahead and click forward. You can reach out to your student's teacher. And if your student, or if you're having a hard time reaching the teacher for some reason, then you can go ahead and connect with the school administrator at your site. And on the next slide, you'll see that we continue to have support for technical issues because we are using so much technology right now. On the slide in front of you, you see our amazing parent facilitators that are available to help your student get connected on Zoom. You can always email the support hotline there, support@slusd.us. Please include your child's student ID number. It will be easier for our team to support them. And if you are the parent of a 6th to 12th grader, on the next slide, on this slide, you'll see our parent facilitators, Joanna Garcia being one of them. She's here with us tonight, and our college and career program coordinators who are at the high school. Any of these individuals also can support your student in accessing technology if there are any problems on Zoom or they're having problems on their learning management system, whether it's Seesaw or Schoology. So those are some of the technicalities because we know that we live in a different reality, but you are here to hear about growth mindset. So let's go to the next slide and see what our primary topics are for tonight. We're going to be talking about what is growth mindset, and then what are some strategies that you might be able to use at home to support a growth mindset for your students. Now, I was a former high school math teacher. And you would think that my life in mathematics has been easy all my life. Let me tell you a little story. Sally, if we can go to the next slide. When I was in kindergarten through 12th grade, that might have been a picture of me. I was really good at the game of school. I was very good at memorizing rules. I was very good at memorizing formulas. I was very good at giving answers in the way that teachers needed in order to pass tests and get good grades in school. So when I graduated high school, of course, I wanted to major in mathematics. I had enjoyed success in it. I had enjoyed the topic a lot all through my years of elementary, middle, and high school. And then I got to college, and you'll see on the next image what happened. So all of a sudden, I was faced with some new math, some math that was different than anything I had ever seen before, and it threw me for a loop. I didn't even know how to begin studying this new mathematics. I didn't know how to ask my professor for help. I didn't really even know how to ask classmates for help because when I was in elementary school and middle and high school, I had just made it on my own by following the rules. So it got so bad that the next slide shows where I was while I was deciding whether or not I was still going to major in mathematics. I was terrified. My identity as a mathematician was destroyed, and I almost quit my math major. It was because I had professors and classmates and family members who really supported me and helped me to believe in myself that I was able to work through that new extra challenging math, complete my math degree, and end up teaching everything from pre-algebra up through advanced placement calculus. I taught math to pre-service teachers who are getting ready to teach math. And I would say that I'm definitely a successful mathematician now, even though I experienced that challenge. So when we have students who don't feel like they're math people or who have a hard time learning mathematics, even though I'm a math teacher, I understand that story. I understand that experience. And so these tips that we're about to share are based on research, but they're also based on an understanding of what it means, what it feels like to students to struggle in mathematics. On this next slide, you'll see a basic definition of growth mindset. So this idea comes out of research that Carol Dweck at Stanford University first shared in a book published in 2006 called Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. And in the book, she talks about a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. A fixed mindset is when we believe that our intelligence, our personality, our character are predetermined. I was born an amazing basketball player. I was born a really good mathematician. I was born being able to talk to strangers really easily and make small talk. A growth mindset is when we believe that our intelligence, personality, and character can be continuously developed, that our true potential on all of these aspects is unknown and unknowable because we can always grow in this area. So the research on growth mindset really emphasizes this ability to grow. And that's what we want to foster in our students. Why? How does mindset affect learning? Well, let's take a look at a couple of the big ways that mindset affects learning on the next slide. If you read Carol Dweck's book, or I'm going to share some resources later to do some more learning on mindset, there are a couple ways that mindset really affects learning and students, and we'll focus on that here tonight. One of the things is when a student has a fixed mindset, they might think, oh, I'm really good at math. My teacher tells me I'm good at math. My classmates tell me I'm good at math. My parents tell me I'm good at math. I'm the one that my sister always comes to when she needs help with her homework. I am a strong, good math student. So what that does for students, what that fixed mindset about their ability does to a student is it makes them think that they have a particular status or identity that they have to keep presenting to the world. I must be that smart math student. And in Carol Dweck's research, what she's found is that that makes students think that math in particular and learning math is more about performance, doing well, getting the right answer, getting a good grade, instead of about learning. And I'm just taking a pause because sometimes I realize I'm speaking quickly for our interpreters to translate. So we want to encourage our students to try challenging things. That's what helps us to learn. And I'll talk a little bit more about that research in a moment. One of the other things that happens is we want to protect that identity as an amazing athlete, an amazing cook, a wonderful big sister. And so then we distance ourselves from things that challenge that identity. So we'll hear a lot from students, I'm just not a math person. That's okay. I wasn't born that way. I wasn't born with those skills. I'm good at other things, but I'm not good at math. But the fact is that we all are born doing mathematical practices. There's actually research on infants and newborns and how they are able to track groups of objects and rest their eyeballs on groups of objects that have more things in them, even at the age of 6 months. So we're all born mathematical, and we can all become more mathematical. One of the things that's really important to understand about how mindset affects learning is we might think that having a fixed mindset would be more negative for students who have already been challenged in mathematics, and that's true. It is very impactful for them. But the other group of students that research has shown are really impacted by these fixed mindsets are actually girls who do really well in math classes in school. Again, imagine you're doing really well, you get good grades, the teacher calls you out for doing well and getting the right answers. So you want to keep that status. And so having a growth mindset means, or not having a growth mindset means that they might be afraid to try more challenging math problems because they don't want to let their teacher down. They don't want to shift their identity to not being a good math student. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, this is what you really care about, I think, which is, okay, I want my child to have a growth mindset. How do I do it? There are a few strategies that I'll talk through here, and I'll talk through a couple, and then if you have questions, definitely you can add them to the chat. You're welcome to message both panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your question. And we'll also ask you for some strategies that you might be using at home to support a growth mindset as I share what you can do based on some of the research that's been done. So let's go to the next slide. The first thing that we can do as adults, whether we're teachers or parents, is we want to focus on praising effort, not ability. We want to focus on the hard work that it took to get to a certain place versus just getting to the destination, okay? So let me tell you a little story about some research that Carol Dweck did on what this does for student achievement. Sally, you're gonna click to the next piece and then we're gonna, I'll tell you when to click for the next piece of the story. So Carol Dweck identified 500 students, 500 fifth graders from across the country. And those students were given what the researchers identified as an easy test. All of the students were given the same test. Now, if you click forward, we'll see that some of the students were praised for their intelligence on the test. Wow, you did well. You must be really smart at this. And then the other students, the other half, were praised for their effort. Wow, you did really well on this test. You must have worked so hard to get there. After the first test and these messages about their achievement, if we click forward, we'll see that those students were given a choice for a second test now. They were told, you can either choose this easy test, you're probably going to do really great because it's easy, or you can choose a harder test that might be more challenging, but you might learn more from it. Let's see what happened with those two groups of students. So the group of students that were praised for their intelligence, 67% of those students chose the easier option. 92% of the students who were praised for how hard they worked chose the harder test to go forward. So already we're starting to see evidence of students changing their behavior based on the messages they're getting about, do I just want to do well, or do I want to learn more and push myself a little bit? Let's see the next part of the story on the next slide. So those students who were praised for intelligence and the students who were praised for their effort now were all given a second test. Let's go ahead and see a little bit about that test. So this test was identified by the researchers as being more challenging than the first. And here's what they found as they observed those students taking that second test. For those students who were praised for their intelligence, the researchers saw that they became frustrated and they tended to give up early on the test. Whereas the second group of students who were praised for their effort, they worked harder, they worked longer, and they also enjoyed the test more. So again, think about your students in their math class, or in fact, any class that might not be their favorite. And the small difference, or rather the big difference that a small change in our words could do for their experiences. The story continues. Let's go to the next slide. So now all of the students were given a third test. The third test was just as easy as the first one that they took. When the students took the test, those who had been praised for their intelligence, wow, you must be so smart at this, their scores actually went down 20%. Same level test, same level of difficulty. And then those students who were praised for their effort, their scores actually went up 30%. So it's about, will students take on harder work? And then actually, there's something about the challenge and believing they can do it where we actually see changes in outcomes. So what might it sound like to praise effort and not ability? We've got some examples here that you can draw from. So for example, instead of saying, you got an A, you must be good at this, you might say, you got an A, you must have worked really hard to get that grade. Instead of saying, wow, how did you get that answer so fast? Wow, you got that answer really fast. Maybe the question was too easy for you. Let's try something more challenging. By the way, there's additional research, which I won't talk about here, but timed math tests are really, really stressful for students. And they actually keep their brains from doing some of the mathematical calculations because of the stress that happens in their brains. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. The second strategy that you could do, and then we're going to take some suggestions from you and some questions. The second strategy we could do is we can teach about brain plasticity and the power of mistakes. What does that mean? Well, what you see on the screen is a picture of a brain, a part of a brain. We call it a synapse, part of the brain that makes connections. And Carol Dweck, the original researcher on growth mindset, actually, they've been doing some research on what happens in the brain with brain chemistry. And if we click forward in the slide, one of their findings is actually every time students make a mistake in math, they grow a new synapse. They actually form a connection in their brain. There's a course that I'm going to share with you later on that is by another researcher at Stanford who's been doing some work on this. It's a free class on how to learn math for students and for families. And they talk a little bit more about that. But what they're thinking with the research is that when the brain is challenged, there's some funniness that's happening. And because of that funniness in the brain, it actually makes it stronger. It causes it to grow. And the neat thing is, you don't even necessarily have to know you made a mistake for the brain to grow. And we're not talking about like an error, like, oh, I wrote a 5 instead of a 3. It's like an understanding kind of mistake. So then the other thing, another contribution to the research is not only does your brain form a new synapse when you make a mistake, but students with a growth mindset experience more brain growth when they make a mistake. So when you make a mistake, your brain grows. And when you have a growth mindset and you believe your brain can grow, it actually grows more. And there's some really neat videos and interviews with students in this course that we don't have time to go through here tonight, where a professor is talking to her 6-year-old child, and her 6-year-old says, okay, let's try something hard. I want to make a mistake so my brain can grow. And that's what we want to encourage our students to do, is to take on challenges, to make mistakes. That is how we learn. Now I've shared 2 strategies, and in a moment, I'll ask you to share in the chat, maybe some ideas for what is working for your family. But I also want to say, as you are, go ahead and you can start typing in the chat, that it's important for us as adults to have a growth mindset for ourselves about doing this work. I've been sharing these strategies with family members for almost 10 years now. I've been following the research for some time, and I still find myself sometimes when I speak to students saying, how did you get that answer so fast? Wow. So we are also going to make mistakes in our own practice to support our young people, and that's okay. But we're going to keep working on it, and we will also get better as adults. So what are some things that you might say to your children at home in order to support their efforts, in order to encourage them to work harder? I will stop talking for a minute, and let's see what gets shared in the chat right now. And of course, again, if you have questions, definitely share them in the chat as well. I'll tell you, as we're waiting for ideas to be shared, this is actually something that I have started doing with friends, with my partner, like speaking in a way to really foster a growth mindset. I can't believe you put the dishes in the dishwasher like that. Wow, thank you so much for putting the dishes away in the dishwasher. I appreciate the work that you did to get it that way. And then maybe I'll give some specific feedback. You know, if you put the plates this way, they'll get cleaner. So there's lots of ways that we can foster growth mindset, not just in mathematics, but actually this has transformed my life and how I communicate with people in my community. All right, so I definitely want to make sure that we get through some other strategies. I do see that there's a question here. How do I respond when my student says that they don't want to do something challenging? Absolutely. And I wonder, you know, a lot of, depending on the age of your child, there are things that students choose to engage in which are challenging because they're fun and they can see an opportunity for progress. So one thing you could do is maybe name one thing that they do that's actually really challenging. Wait, you play that Minecraft game and you get to level, I don't know Minecraft that well, 3028. How did you do that? That seemed really hard, right? Wow, that took a lot of hard work. Let's try to apply it over here. And so I'm pulling from some previous family learning sessions where maybe the resistance is to the specific challenging task. I don't want to do my mathematics because I feel like I might fail at it, right? And so you could have conversation about, you know, I know this math is really hard, But remember what we learned about how it can make your brain grow? I really want my brain to grow, don't you? Let's sit down and try to look at this together and see how we can make our brain grow together.
Elaine, we have another one that is about sharing your own challenges and how you've had to work through things. So modeling for your child and role modeling, like, this is what I do when I come to a challenge, and sharing that partnership with your child about challenges and effort to work through them. It's a really lovely idea.
It sure is, yeah. As much as we can, demonstrate through language and our own actions, like, over this break, I'm trying to learn guitar. I'm not good at it, right? But hey, watch me really struggle with this. This is so hard. But 6 months ago, I couldn't play my guitar this way. I love that. All right. Yes, thank you. So I see another comment, right, about the way we speak and how we frame the challenges in a different way, that really these are things that are going to help us grow. Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to the next couple of strategies. Okay, what you see in front of you is some shapes. And this is an example of a way that you and maybe some of your child's math teachers are encouraging flexible thinking and discussion. Why is this important? Because sometimes with a fixed mindset, along with that comes the idea that there is just one right answer, just one right way to do things, especially in math. But in reality, there are lots of different ways to think about lots of different things, including the mathematics. And when we can recognize and encourage flexible thinking, that lets students know that, hey, I am good and my thinking matters and I can contribute to this conversation about mathematics, right? It's not just, oh, I don't have the right answer. I didn't think about it the way that my teacher thought about it, so I'm not a good math student. That in fact, there's all kinds of ways that are really valid to think about math. So in this particular diagram, if I were to give this to, well, in fact, let's see here. If we were in class right now, what I would do is I would ask students to share how they see the shapes growing. And sometimes students say, oh, well, I see a new row being added on the bottom for every step. That's how I see them growing. And some people say, ooh, I see like a volcano, like as if there's some cubes coming from the taller stack of cubes in the middle, and they're coming out and then they're landing on top of the other cubes. And then we have other students who see it in different ways, and actually teachers too. I think in one session, there were 15 different ways to see how these shapes were growing. And so we can encourage and demonstrate that there are lots of ways to think about mathematics. And why do we want to encourage discussion around the flexible thinking? Because again, no one of us has all of the answers. No one of us knows it all. But together, with all of our different understandings, we can support our collective learning. I can learn from someone else's way of thinking about it. They can learn from my way of thinking about it. And all of us are going to get smarter at math because of this. So we want to encourage flexible thinking and discussion. If you were talking to your own child at home, maybe about these shapes, and they say, this is how I see it growing. Oh, wow, neat. Can you see it growing in a different way? Oh, hey, I heard your brother saw it this way. How does your way connect to your brother's way? Right? So those are some conversations that you could have at home. Oh, and then let's go to the next slide. And I think I already mentioned a couple of these ideas. So what does encouraging flexible thinking do? There's more than one way to think about the problem, and our thinking gets more robust with more ideas. All right, so this next strategy is very connected. I mean, you'll see all of these are very connected. Another way we can really support a growth mindset, especially in math, again, a lot of us probably in this session have had some maybe traumatizing math experiences ourselves. I shared my story. I've heard a lot of really sad stories where people felt like, oh, I can't be a math person because they didn't get the right answer or they weren't fast enough in getting their answer, right? But really, we want to focus on the process and the thinking, not just the answer. Again, right? There's always an opportunity to grow. It's not just about being at the answer and getting to the destination. So this is an example of an image that some of your students might have seen in the past, and your teacher might be doing a dot talk with them. And the question might be, how many dots do you see? But also, how do you see them? And if we were in the class, or if you want to in the chat right now, I would say, okay, on the count of 3, I want everyone to unmute and I want you to say how many dots you see. Okay, 1, 2, 3. And then everyone says 7. And maybe not everyone says 7. Maybe some people have some different numbers, but that's okay because we're just putting our thinking into the space. Okay, who else got 7? Who got 9? Who got 10? Okay. Let's see how you saw those dots. So then we'll start to ask some students to share how they saw their dots. And the teacher or you might start to note all the different ways they can think about these 7 dots in front of us. So maybe we have some students who are seeing them in rows, like on the left. Maybe we have it like on the right with diagonals. Sometimes people see 2 squares that overlap, and then they have to remove the extra dot that's shared. Or maybe some people see all 9, and then they take out the corners. Those are missing. All of those are right. None of them is better than any of the others. So it depends on what we're using it for. But again, I hope that you can see how not just focusing on the answer, 7 dots, but focusing on the thinking can help students to develop a strong math identity, to help them believe that they are mathematical thinkers. Here's another example on the next slide. A lot of you probably had a worksheet similar to this when you were in school, where you had to do a lot of problems to practice a new mathematical idea. Well, I mentioned earlier that timed tests actually make it hard for students to answer math questions because they get stressed out and anxious, and then parts of their brain get activated, which affect the part of their brain that does mathematics. So really, we want to focus on depth, on understanding the concept, and not necessarily speed. So if you click forward, you'll see that with Common Core instruction, we're trying to transition. Sometimes we'll still have worksheets for practice, but we're trying to transition to some different ways of practicing facts. This is an example of what we call an open middle problem. And this might be something that you work on tonight over dinner time when you're done with our session tonight. The task is, can you use the numbers from 1 through 9 only one time each to make that equation true? So we're not going to give you the answer tonight, but let's see. Can you come up with some solutions? Is there more than one solution? Is there just one solution? How did you get there? What did you try? Now, it's really important that we understand that these are not just soft skills. This is not just about us building up self-esteem of students, which is absolutely important and essential. But I want to show you how this connects to actually what teachers are responsible for in the classroom. All of those words that you see in front of you are what we call the standards for mathematical practice. They are 8 habits of mind that stay the same from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. So when you hear about the California Common Core standards, this is part of our California Common Core standards. It's not just about adding and subtracting and solving equations and graphing polynomials, but it's also about making sense of problems and persevering in solving. We have to have a growth mindset for us to take on hard, confusing problems. Notice, construct viable arguments, number 3, and critique the reasoning of others. Right? We talked about discussion and sharing ideas. You'll notice in your students' classrooms that their teachers spend time putting them into breakout rooms, asking for feedback, asking students to share their thinking. This is to help develop them as mathematicians. When we talk about using appropriate tools strategically, let's think flexibly, right? You don't have to just do it the way your teacher showed you. What makes sense to you, right? Use strategy to determine the best way to get through this problem for you, depending on what's being asked. So these are our standards for mathematical practice. And you'll notice that there's a link to our website there, and we have the standards for math practice posted with some more information on them if you're interested. All right, so I see that, so again, we want to invite people to share the strategies that they have been using at home to help their students, to help your students develop a growth mindset. And I think that there's a few questions in the chat that I want to get to. But before I do that, I think Sally, you want to interject.
Well, there was a great suggestion from a parent. I think this or family community member who is thinking through strategies and came up with a really great one, I think, in our chat, which I wanted to share because that's exciting. Um, I think as we're talking about shifting away from what were our parental learned responses of, you got an A, you're so good at that, you're so smart. It's hard sometimes in the moment to not just rely on what you've learned. And so trying to shift our language, this community member said, well, maybe I'll make myself like a deck of cards of responses of what I want to say that are growth mindset and have them around the house. So when I see my student doing it, I can pull from that deck and come up with a response that feels appropriate to this idea. So I just thought that was brilliant
Yes.
here in this, like thinking through all these issues and coming up with new ideas.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a muscle we have to develop and like practice just like anything else. So I think that that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. We're just looking at some of the questions that have been shared in the chat right now. So there's a question about how do we know what works when our kids did the work with their teacher? How do we get feedback often enough to help the adult grow their mindset? So I think the question is, how do you know the messages that your child might be getting in the classroom, and maybe whether your messaging is helping with the student's mindset in the classroom? That's a really great question. You know, I know that teachers love hearing and communicating with family members, right? I mean, grading is not grades just for grades. It's to let you all and the students know how students are doing in terms of learning. And so I think if you have questions about that, definitely reach out to your teacher. You know, and you can even share, I've been working on the student's mindset at home, and I'd love to know if you're seeing any changes in the classroom. And that might also alert the teacher to pay attention a little bit more to how the student is interacting in class. Let's see here. How can I help my child to improve if she's not really interested in mathematics and she sometimes is challenged to work hard? So sometimes I think the strategy that Sally shared earlier about positioning or modeling a growth mindset for yourself can be really powerful. So even sitting next to your student, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and saying, okay, actually, Sally, let's go ahead and jump to the next slide and I'll just talk about it there. Okay, so let's say your child is at home working on homework. Maybe they're frustrated. This is not anything we ever hear about or see. Kids are never frustrated with homework. And it's so hard and they don't want to take it on. So you could just sit down with them. Now, what we really want to practice is avoiding this statement. Sally, if you'll click forward. Oops. I am not a math person. Okay. I don't blame anyone for saying that. We've all had our own math learning experiences, but let's position ourselves as a learner as well. Okay. So that when you sit down next to the student, you say, oh, what are you working on? Oh, that looks challenging. Oh, I'm not sure either. Let's see what we do know right now. And let's find out the question that we can ask, that you can ask your teacher tomorrow. Or you could say, oh, I don't know how to do this either, but let's sit down and let's try to figure it out together. And again, ask the student what they know, right? And start to work through the problem that way. So sometimes just really sitting down and taking on the task with your child might be enough to help them get over that first hurdle where they're afraid to try because it's hard and they've had some bad experiences feeling like they didn't succeed with hard math. Let's see here. Questions about observations of what has become challenging. So definitely you can ask your questions in the chat and we will answer them as they come forward. So I see Sally shared, let the student do the best they can and then help them when they need it instead of going in and saving them, jumping in. Motivate them by talking about how you can see the change and what they can do because of how hard they worked. I love that. That's awesome. You know, again, we as adults, because we take care of young people, so many times we want to jump in and we want to save them. We want to rescue them from the hard work because we don't want them to feel bad about themselves. And when we train teachers, sometimes we have to say, it's okay to let a student sit in what we call productive struggle. So it's at that point where it's hard, right? But I'm not going to come in and do it for you just because you asked me for help. Maybe I'll ask you a question to help move you forward. Maybe I'll ask you a question to see what you understand, but I'm not going to save you because I know that you can make progress on your own. I'm seeing someone else is sharing about how important it is for them to have students articulate how they got the answer and not judging about how they got there, right? Our thinking is our thinking. Let's see here. And Sally, if there are Spanish questions, maybe you can help me because I'm seeing a lot more questions right now. So I'm just trying to navigate through all of them.
There's a lot of parents who or family members, community members who are just talking about the importance of being positive with your kids and sitting there and helping them through thinking and the work that they're doing. How motivating it is when they feel like their kids are more motivated when they're sitting with them and telling them what, how hard they're working, being positive,
Okay.
and not getting into that frustration piece, right?
Okay. Yes, thank you. I also see a question, and maybe this is related to a question about when you see your students struggling, like when and how to intervene. Is it okay to say, oh, let's look up maybe some videos after, but let's try and see what we can do first together before we look up the video? Absolutely, absolutely. And you know your child, and you know maybe where that point is where, gosh, they're just are going to be too frustrated and they're going to give up, and we don't want to get to that point. But yeah, let's try it together a little bit first before we jump straight to finding the answer.
Another question that's coming up that I think is one of the things we're finding in distance virtual learning is this way to how do you encourage your student to ask questions in class without feeling kind of embarrassed? Because we've seen that in this new sort of scenario, there aren't a whole lot of private moments, and
Mm,
so Celine might have some things on that. But I also know we've been talking about if you think that your child is sort of having that issue, I think emailing a teacher and saying that this is something that you feel or your student can be part of the email that they're feeling, at least alerts the teacher to sort of seek out that student in a positive way, of course. Just knowing that they have questions, but it's hard to ask in that Zoom room.
yeah. Yep, definitely. And I know every teacher that I work with, which is every teacher in the district, the students can private chat. So if they're embarrassed to ask the question in front of everyone, they can just direct it to the teacher. Um, and actually, I'll share a strategy that some teachers use in the classroom. It's my favorite mistake, right?
Mhm.
Because we want to encourage mistakes. Those, again, when we make a mistake, that's when our brain grows. And so you might even at the end of the day say, Sally, what was the favorite mistake you made today? Right? And that's a slow process, but that can also start to set a tone of, wow, not knowing and making errors. This is wonderful. Let's recognize these moments. So we have just a couple slides, and I see that there's some more questions. Let's go ahead and move to the next one. Right, so this is, again, a reminder for all of us as adults in this space that we're talking about maybe small shifts in messaging, but it's hard work. And so again, just as we want to help students have a growth mindset in mathematics or science or playing piano or learning how to cook, let's have a growth mindset for ourselves as adults, learning how to support our students. I definitely have beat myself up in those moments in class when I said, wow, how did you get that answer so fast? Oh my gosh, how much work have I just undone? That's okay. It's a mistake. Okay. I live in it, and then I'm going to let it go. So do the same for you too, right? And this word that you see on the screen is so powerful. I can't praise my student for their effort yet. I can't bake a souffle yet, right? That just adding that word yet totally changes the meaning of a sentence. All right. So let's get through to the last couple slides. There are some resources that I want to make sure that I share with people who want to find out more about growth mindset. There's a lot of research out there. So both links that you see there go to a website called UCubed. And UCubed is where the the squares task came from. And there's a lot more fun math puzzles there that you can find if you want to talk about with your students. But that is where there's been a lot of research specifically for growth mindset and mathematics. And then the second link for how to learn math is a free class that they offer. Again, it's through the Stanford Graduate School of Education. It's 6 online classes. Each class is about 20 minutes. It's usually a little video. There's young people in the video talking about a lot of what we talked about here tonight. And one fun thing to do might be to take that class with your child at home. It's really interesting to go through it as an adult. And I think for those of you who are trying to model growth mindset with your student, it would be really neat to do it with them, and it is free. All righty. So last few moments. And definitely you all are welcome to stay. Again, continue to add questions in the chat. If you want to message panelists and attendees, if you have strategies to share, we invite you to do that. One of the things that we found is in these sessions, it's families connecting with each other and sharing their own strategies. That has been just an extra layer of learning that we knew would happen, but we didn't know would happen at such a large level. Again, this session was recorded, and so we will post the recording as well as the slides on our family and community page, so you'll be able to reference it later. And I'm seeing that there's a question here for our elementary families about a student who really enjoys doing math work in Zern and less so in the workbook right now. And so how to get a student to be interested in written math and doing what's in the workbook and spend less time playing games in Zern. Wow, I love Zern, I have to say. So I really want her to do work in Zern, but I understand we want to have a balance. And could it be around setting a timer and maybe establishing, right, some like, oh yeah, let's work on Zern for 40 minutes and then we're gonna practice what you learned in the game in the workbook so we can show the teacher how much you've learned in playing through this game. In terms of, and I don't know if the challenge for engaging in the workbook is because it's challenging or boring, right? Because that's maybe a little bit different, or the student finds it boring. But certainly if it's challenging and she's afraid to try the workbook because the problems look harder, then maybe some of the strategies that we talked about here tonight could start to address fostering that growth mindset. Sally, do you want to add something?
I was going to say, I also think some of the links that Celine has in this slide deck, you know, it might be a different grade level, but that challenge she posed to you all to do at dinner tonight, right? The open middle. So doing sort of thinking through math problems together, and how creative can we as a family get? How many ways can we solve this? So I think that's an interim place between Zern, which is it does have really great resources, but it's by herself. And then doing some sort of thinking all together might be a good bridge to then being able to do some of the more standard work in the workbook. But I think the more you just show how math has so many different ways to go at it, I think the more likely she is to dig into all those different ways.
Thank you. So just one more time, Sally, if you could put the resources slide up, and then what I'll do is I'm going to share the link to the slides. So when you go to that link, then you'll be able to click on these resources and some others that are embedded in the deck. Okay. So let's see. On that note, I want to thank you all so much for being here tonight. I had a really good time talking about math and growth mindset. And we look forward to seeing you next week for our next family learning series. Same time, same place. And hopefully we'll see some familiar faces at that point too. Have a good night, everybody. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.